Growing up, I genuinely believed my family was cut from the same wholesome American fabric that so many sitcoms idealize. Full of laughter at the dinner table, encouragement over school projects, and warm hugs after long days. I used to think we were a team, a unit bound by love and fairness, where each of us mattered equally, and dreams were nurtured with the same gentle hands. My parents always smiled in public, always looked proud when neighbors asked about their daughters, and for years I convinced myself those smiles meant I was seen. But as I got older, I began to see the cracks. Small at first, like the way they always sat front row at Madison's dance recitals, but forgot the dates of my art exhibitions, or how they celebrated her B+ like a gold medal, but dismissed my A with a nod. Still, I clung to hope. I believed, foolishly, that when it truly counted, when my future was on the line, they'd show up for me the way parents are supposed to. I thought college would be the great equalizer. I imagined that when I got accepted, they'd hug me, maybe even cry, and say they were proud. But the moment that defined my reality came with brutal finality. I had just gotten my acceptance letter from a state university. My hands were shaking with excitement as I opened it, heart pounding like a drumbeat of validation. I ran downstairs, bursting with the kind of pride that only comes from doing something on your own. Madison was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. My mom was in the kitchen, and my dad was reading the newspaper like it was any other Thursday. "I got in," I said, beaming. My mom looked at me, her expression blank. My dad barely glanced up. "That's good," she said flatly, before returning to chopping vegetables. I stood there, waiting for something more, anything. But instead, I got the sentence that would etch itself into the marrow of my bones. "We're only supporting Madison's education," she said without hesitation, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I blinked, confused. "What?" I asked. "We can't afford both," my dad added casually, as if reading out tomorrow's weather. "And Madison's always been more focused. It just makes sense." My jaw hung open. My acceptance letter trembled in my hands, like a joke no one laughed at. "I've worked hard too," I said, voice cracking. "I got good grades. I deserve this." My mom shrugged. "We've made our decision. You'll have to figure it out." And that was that. They didn't ask how I felt. They didn't offer alternatives. They didn't care. In that moment, I felt like a shadow in my own home. Present, but unseen. I went back to my room and sat in silence. The kind that wraps around your throat and squeezes. My dreams didn't just feel delayed. They felt denied. And Madison? She didn't even blink. She just smiled and asked if Mom could help her pick out new bedding for her dorm. That night, as I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my tears hot and silent, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't scream or beg. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. But one day, they would regret ever choosing her and abandoning me. I was going to show them who I really was, with action, not words. I got a job waiting tables at a greasy diner where tips were few and hours were long. I cleaned motel bathrooms on weekends, my knees raw from scrubbing. I slept 4 hours a night and lived on ramen and caffeine. I enrolled in community college and paid every cent myself. I bought used textbooks so old they had torn covers and outdated content. I studied in bus terminals, in break rooms, anywhere I could find a sliver of quiet. I was bone-tired, constantly stressed, but my fire never went out. I reminded myself every day, this pain was temporary, but the power I was building would last forever. Madison, meanwhile, posted selfies in designer clothes, at sorority parties, by the campus pool. Her dorm was a Pinterest board. My parents visited her monthly, bringing groceries and care packages. They never called me, not even on my birthday, but I didn't let the silence break me. It sharpened me. I stacked small wins, acing midterms, landing a competitive internship, transferring to the same university as Madison without telling anyone. I walked the same halls she did. But we lived in separate worlds. While she partied, I hustled. While she spent, I saved. While she coasted, I climbed. Slowly, I started to gain traction. Professors knew my name, peers respected my drive, and awards started to come in. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And the best part? They had no idea. I became the storm they didn't see coming. Every hardship I endured, every tear I shed in private, was fuel. I wanted them to sit at my graduation one day and realize that the daughter they deemed unworthy had outshined the one they invested everything in. I didn't need revenge in the form of insults or confrontation. No, mine would be quiet and devastating. I wanted their regret to taste bitter and lasting. I wanted them to choke on the silence they once gave me, and I would deliver that reckoning with grace, wearing my cap and gown, smiling as they realized the depth of their mistake. Because I wasn't just the other daughter. I was the storm. Balancing work and school was nothing short of brutal. It was a relentless, grinding reality that pressed down on my chest every single day, like a weight I couldn't set down, even for a breath. The mornings came before I was ready, and the nights stretched on with assignments unfinished and dreams that had to wait their turn. There were days when I showed up to class with greasy hair tucked under a beanie, my hands still smelling faintly of bleach from the motel cleaning shift I had just finished, and nights when I sat hunched over my laptop in a corner booth at the 24-hour diner during my break, trying to squeeze essays out of an exhausted brain and aching body. Some nights I cried quietly into my pillow, the thin walls of my rented basement room swallowing my sobs while the world carried on above me, unaware that a young woman beneath their feet was burning herself alive to rise from ashes she never asked to be thrown into. I felt invisible, like a ghost among the living, watching classmates get dropped off in shiny SUVs by parents who brought them homemade meals and asked about their exams. I watched families hug in parking lots on weekends, their pride and support radiating like sunshine, while I sat alone on bus benches, eating vending machine snacks for dinner. No one ever came to my presentations. No one cheered when I got an A. No one even asked me how I was doing. But through every tear, every skipped party, every morning I forced my legs to move forward when my soul wanted to collapse. I found something fierce growing inside me, something that couldn't be broken or silenced. Every dollar I saved by saying no to takeout, every hour spent working instead of resting, every sacrifice became a brick in the fortress I was building around my dignity, around my belief in myself. I wasn't just trying to earn a degree. I was trying to reclaim the version of myself my parents refused to see. I was trying to resurrect the worth they buried under their favoritism. And Madison, she remained the golden child, her life still glittering with store-bought comfort and curated ease. Her Instagram a slideshow of privileged moments, yoga retreats, weekend getaways, group photos with captions like, "Blessed." Sometimes she sent me messages, passive-aggressive jabs disguised as humor, calling me the scholarship reject, or asking if I was still working that glamorous motel gig. Once, she even left a comment under one of my campus award photos. "Look who finally figured out what hard work is." I didn't respond. Her words fell around me like feathers, soft, annoying, and utterly powerless. I was focused, laser sharp, every cell in my body aligned toward my goal. There was no time to pity myself, no space for resentment. My revenge wasn't loud or petty. It was steady, it was earned, and it was coming. I had made my way into the honors college, earned leadership roles in multiple academic clubs, and by senior year, I was interning with a senator, a far cry from cleaning bathrooms and taking orders from drunks at the diner. I still didn't tell my parents anything. Let them live in ignorance. Let them continue their fantasy that only Madison was worth investing in. They never called to ask how I was doing, never offered to help, not even when I needed a new laptop and had to max out my credit card. But life has a funny way of spinning the wheel. Near the end of my final semester, I applied to a graduate program, the crown jewel of my major, a program so competitive that even the best students often got waitlisted or rejected outright. It was the same one Madison had applied to years earlier and bragged about for months, only to be quietly turned down. I didn't mention to anyone that I'd applied. I told no one, not even my closest friends. I submitted my application at midnight after finishing a 10-hour shift, fingers trembling as I uploaded my essays, unsure if I'd even hear back. Weeks passed. I almost forgot about it as finals consumed me. Then one afternoon, while sitting outside the library under a cloudless sky, I refreshed my inbox and saw it. The subject line that stole my breath: "Congratulations on your admission." For a full minute I couldn't move. I stared at the screen, hands frozen, heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. I read it again and again. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I just sat there, letting the validation pour through every crack my parents had left in me. I had made it, on my own, against every odd. I had been accepted into the very program that once rejected my sister, the same one my parents had assumed was too good for someone like me. I clutched my phone and felt the years of pain rising in my throat, not as tears this time, but as fuel. The power was shifting. For the first time, I wasn't the one looking up. They were going to be looking at me. I didn't call Madison. I didn't text my parents. I simply updated my LinkedIn with the news and waited. And like clockwork, the silence broke. Madison called 2 days later. She tried to sound casual. "So, grad school?" she said, her voice tight, the smile forced. "That program, huh? Wow, that's impressive." I said thank you and left it there. I owed her nothing more. My parents called the next night, their voices awkward, hollow. My dad congratulated me like he was reading a script. My mom asked if I needed help moving. I smiled to myself. It had begun. The long road had been cruel, but I had walked every mile with blistered feet and an unbroken will. And now, standing at the edge of my triumph, I was finally tall enough for them to see what they had so eagerly ignored. The storm I promised was no longer coming. It had arrived. Graduation day arrived like a wave I had been bracing myself for. A moment that had once lived in my dreams as a soft, warm image of closure and pride, but now stood before me, sharpened by everything I had endured, by every scar I had earned on the long, lonely path to this milestone. The sky was a perfect blue that morning, almost mocking in its cheerfulness, as I slipped into my black cap and gown, hands trembling, not with nerves, but with the weight of knowing that today was not just a ceremony. It was the battlefield I had silently prepared for, where the truth would no longer be something buried beneath family dinners and holiday cards, but something that would rise up and stand tall for all to witness. My parents had promised, with all the enthusiasm of someone RSVPing to a boring work function, that they would try to make it. Their words devoid of warmth, obligation bleeding through every syllable. I didn't hold my breath for their presence. I had stopped expecting them to show up for me years ago, but I invited everyone who had actually stood by me. The people who had seen me fight, break, rebuild, and rise. My professors who had watched me grow from a tired freshman into a fierce academic leader. My co-workers who had covered my shifts so I could take finals. My closest friends who had cheered me on in silence and storm. I walked into the auditorium with my head high, every step echoing in my mind like a heartbeat. The tassel on my cap brushing against my cheek like a whisper from the girl I used to be. The girl who cried alone in a basement room. The girl who begged for recognition from a family that had already made up their minds about her worth. The crowd was enormous, a sea of proud families, teary-eyed parents, and siblings holding signs. I scanned the room once and spotted them, my parents, sitting stiffly near the back row, hands folded in their laps like strangers attending a funeral. They hadn't even brought flowers. I felt a flicker of that old pain, but it didn't sting like before. I was too far past needing their validation. Instead, I took a deep breath and waited. When the dean announced my name as the recipient of the Academic Resilience Award, an honors speaker, there was a pause in the air, the kind of silence that grips the chest of a room. I rose from my seat as a low ripple of applause began, growing louder, then turning into a full standing ovation. I could see heads turning, cameras rising, my friends cheering with tears in their eyes, but my gaze found only one place, the stunned, pale faces of my parents, who looked like they had just seen a ghost walk out of a fire. My mother's lips parted slightly in disbelief, and my father blinked twice as if trying to process what he was seeing. Madison, seated beside them in a pastel dress too bright for the occasion, gripped her phone like it might shatter. I climbed the steps to the podium, each one slower than the last, savoring every moment, every heartbeat, because this was mine. Not borrowed, not handed down, not gifted. Earned with blood, sweat, and sheer refusal to disappear. I stood at the microphone, the spotlight hot on my face, the crowd hushed, waiting. I paused, letting my breath steady, then began to speak, my voice quiet but sharp as glass. For years, I said, I felt invisible in my own home. I was the other daughter, the one who didn't sparkle enough, who didn't make the cut, who didn't get the scholarships, the praise, or the encouragement. I was the one who sat silently at dinners while the golden child was celebrated, the one who was told I wasn't worth the investment. I paused again, locking eyes with the very people who had once called me a disappointment. But I'm not here because someone lifted me up. I'm here because I refused to stay down. I'm here not because they believed in me, but because I believed in myself when no one else did. The room was completely still, the kind of stillness that comes before something cracks wide open. I saw a professor wipe a tear from her cheek. I saw one of my co-workers nod slowly, mouthing yes. And I saw my mother drop her gaze to the floor, unable to meet mine. This isn't just a graduation, I continued. This is a declaration for every person who was ever told they weren't enough. For every child who watched their siblings get love and attention while they got silence. For every soul who had to build their own ladder because no one ever offered them a step. Your worth is not defined by the people who fail to see it. Your value isn't measured by their neglect. Your future belongs to you, and only you. A wave of claps erupted, then cheers, and I stood there, not smiling out of pride, but relief. It was done. I had said everything I had swallowed for years, turned pain into power, and made sure it didn't go unheard. I stepped down, the applause following me like a victory anthem, and when I returned to my seat, my heart was light. I didn't even look toward my parents again. I didn't need to. The message was already etched into every word, every pause, every breath of that speech. I wasn't the other daughter anymore. I was the one who stood in the fire and didn't burn. I was the one who didn't just survive. I transformed. And now, the spotlight wasn't on the family favorite, the curated success story, the golden child. It was on me, the daughter who had been left behind and who had chosen to rise. Anyway, as the last notes of applause faded and the ceremony crowd began to disperse into clusters of hugs, laughter, and photo flashes, I stepped down from the podium with a storm of emotions surging in my chest. Pride, pain, vindication, and the raw sting of old wounds reopened in public view. My eyes scanned the crowd instinctively, unsure of what I was looking for until I spotted them. My parents, standing stiffly near the back exit, surrounded by people they clearly didn't recognize. People who knew me, people who had seen me struggle, who had helped shape me into the woman I had become. My heart tightened when I noticed Madison standing beside them, her arms folded across her chest, her lips pressed into a line of tight discomfort. She couldn't even meet my gaze. For a moment, I hesitated. The part of me that still ached for their approval, that still remembered being a little girl, desperate for her daddy to clap when she read a poem aloud, or her mom to beam with pride at a drawing tacked to the fridge. That part wanted to go to them, to hear them say they were sorry, that they had been wrong, that I had always mattered. But that fragile hope died the second my father stepped forward, his voice uncertain, and said, "Lena, we're proud of you," like it was a phrase borrowed from a stranger. My spine straightened as my years of quiet suffering surged forward like a tide. I didn't need that hollow sentence. Not now, not after everything. I met his eyes squarely and interrupted, my voice calm, but slicing through the awkward tension like glass through silk. Proud? You never showed it when it mattered. I saw him flinch as I continued, my voice rising only slightly, fueled by years of being unheard. You ignored my dreams, paid for hers, and expected me to be grateful for crumbs. Do you know what that felt like? Watching you cheer her on while I struggled to keep myself afloat? And you didn't care. You pretended I was fine, because acknowledging my pain would have meant admitting you failed me. I could see the discomfort spread across his face, and beside him, my mother stepped forward, as if to calm the moment. "Lena, honey, we didn't mean to." But I was already turning to her, my eyes stinging with unshed tears that refused to fall this time. "You always say that." I cut her off. "You didn't mean to." But what does that even mean when I sat at the kitchen table begging for help? And you looked right through me? When you wrote Madison's tuition checks and told me I had to figure it out? Love shouldn't be conditional. Support shouldn't come with favorites. You say you love both your daughters, but your actions never showed it. And now that I've succeeded without your help, now you want to pretend we were always a team. I saw her hand drop, her fingers trembling slightly, and for once, she didn't have a rebuttal. The silence between us was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The space between who they thought they were and who they actually had been. I could feel the eyes of my friends and professors nearby, lingering just close enough to hear without intruding, and a part of me wanted to crawl away from the confrontation. But a bigger part of me, the Lena who had worked double shifts, who had studied under flickering lamps, who had cried in library corners and picked herself up every damn time. She needed this moment. Madison, still standing a few feet behind, finally shifted uncomfortably, then murmured something I couldn't hear, like even she couldn't defend what they'd done. My eyes met hers briefly, not with hate, but with clarity. She had always been the chosen one, but she didn't ask for that title. She had just played her part, and maybe now, for the first time, she realized the cost of it. I turned back to my parents one last time. "I don't need your validation anymore," I said. Not bitter, not cruel, just honest. This degree, this success, this moment, I earned it, not to prove you wrong, but to prove myself right. You don't get to take pride in something you didn't invest in. Not emotionally, not financially, not as parents. My dad's mouth opened again. But I didn't wait to hear more. I walked away, not storming, not crying, but walking with purpose, with dignity, with the peace of someone who had carried her pain for years and finally decided to set it down. Behind me, I heard nothing, not footsteps, not apologies, not the desperate scramble of parents trying to fix what they broke, just silence. And in that silence, I found something I never knew I'd been looking for. Freedom. True, unshackled freedom from the weight of trying to earn their love. I stepped into the arms of my friends, my mentors, the people who had shown up for me over the years, and in their warm embraces and tearful congratulations, I found a family of my own choosing. The weight lifted off my shoulders felt like a physical thing, like chains snapping one by one. And though part of my heart would always carry the scar of parental rejection, I finally understood that my value was never theirs to give or take away. I was whole, I was enough, and I had rewritten the ending of my story with my own hands. Standing alone beneath the lingering glow of the stage lights, long after the echoes of applause had finally faded into silence, I felt a deep, unexpected calm wrap itself around my soul. A calm that was at once fierce and gentle, quiet, yet electric with the weight of everything I had survived and everything I had yet to become. It wasn't just a moment of triumph or relief. It was a profound understanding that the battle I had waged for so many years wasn't really against my parents or even against Madison, though they were the face of it, but against something far more insidious and invisible, the heavy, suffocating chains of expectation, neglect, and conditional love that too many of us carry, unseen and unheard, beneath the surface of family dinners and holiday smiles, the kind of chains that bind you in silence, that whisper you're never enough, that teach you early on that some people are meant to be loved and supported, while others are meant to fade into the background. And now, in this rare, almost sacred space, I finally saw it clearly. Their favoritism, the cold dismissal, the neglect. None of it was ever truly about me or my worth. It was about their own fears, their own insecurities, the cracks in their own hearts that they refused to confront, and their inability to see beyond the narrow, distorted lens of their perfectionism and pride. I was never just fighting for their acceptance. I was fighting to break free from a legacy of favoritism, from the invisible rules they wrote but never spoke aloud. I had built my path on my own terms, slowly and painfully, brick by brick, fueled by nothing but my own relentless determination. Every dollar earned with sweat and tears, every hour of study while others partied, every moment of loneliness and self-doubt, all of it became the foundation of a success they never helped shape, a success that was mine and mine alone. And in the end, that is what made my story more than just a tale of revenge. It became a testament to self-respect forged in the fires of adversity, to perseverance born out of isolation, and to the shattering of the old, unfair cycles that have defined what love, family, and worthiness mean for too long. Every night I spent feeling invisible, every tear that fell in the quiet of my room, every time I wondered if I would ever be enough, those moments didn't break me. They became fuel for a fire inside me that refused to be extinguished. To anyone listening who feels invisible, ignored, or cast aside by those who should be their greatest champions, hear this clearly and carry it with you. Your worth is not measured by their neglect, nor diminished by their blindness. Your worth is found in the way you stand up for your dreams, in how fiercely you believe in yourself when no one else will, and in your courage to rise over and over above the pain that tries to keep you down. I want those watching, those who have been hurt by the very people who should have loved them most, to understand this essential truth. The battle for acceptance is not won through bitterness, anger, or hatred. It is won by reclaiming your power and your voice, loud, unshaken, unapologetic. To the parents who may hear this story, who might glimpse their own mistakes reflected back, it's never too late to rewrite the narrative. Love your children equally, not just in words, but in the way you show up, the way you support, the way you celebrate who they truly are, not who you wish they'd be, or who you imagine they could be if only they tried harder. True love does not come with conditions, favoritism, or judgment. It comes with acceptance, encouragement, and a belief so deep and unwavering that your children can walk through life with their heads held high, no matter what. I saw the shock on their faces that day at my graduation, the color drained from their skin, the disbelief raw in their eyes. But that moment, as electric as it was not my true victory. My real triumph was quieter, deeper, and infinitely more powerful. It was the victory of proving to myself, beyond any doubt, that no matter how hard they tried to hold me down, how fiercely they tried to keep me invisible, I rose, higher and stronger than they ever imagined possible. And yet, as I stepped off that stage, surrounded by the cheers of friends who had become my chosen family, tears of pride and joy streaming down their faces, a strange, gentle calm settled over me. It was a calm that whispered, this was not the end, but a new beginning, a beginning of a life where I define my own worth, where I write my own story, and where I no longer seek approval from those who refused to see me for who I truly am. And in that calm, a flicker of something else lingered. A question, a challenge, a future unwritten, waiting patiently for me to decide what comes next. Because the most powerful revenge is not just in success or triumph. It is in the choice to live fully on your own terms, to decide whether to build bridges or burn them, to forgive or to never forget. My story is far from over. And while my parents' silence after that day was loud and heavy, and Madison's avoidance spoke volumes, I knew deep down that I held the pen for the next chapter. Would they reach out one day, finally willing to see me as I am? Would I want them to? Or would I keep moving forward, unstoppable, unshaken, a force they never expected, a force they could never control? The answer hung in the balance, a suspenseful silence that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. And as I gazed toward the horizon, toward the endless possibilities of my future, a smile spread across my face. Not because the road ahead was easy, but because no matter what came next, I had already won, because I had found my voice, my power, and my unbreakable self. And that above all else, was the message that truly mattered, a message I would carry with me, share with the world, and live by every single day.